Hello guys, I hope you are doing well. In this video, let's talk about HTML input types. Okay, we're going to describe the different types of HTML input element. Okay, there are different input types that exist, and as you know, when you create an input, you need to specify the type attribute in order to know whether it's going to be a button, a text field, a password field, a radio button, a submit button, and all of that. So I'm going to show you what are the various or the different types of input that we can have in an HTML4. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the text input. So we will come here and say input type. The type attribute is used to define the type of your input you want to create, and we will do like this. Okay, so by default, if you do not put the type here, by default the input would be considered to be a text field or a text input. Okay, so here when you say type like this, this is to define a single line text input field. So as you can see here, this is a single line. Whatever you are going to write here is going to display, on a single line. So this is the type attribute. So we can even add some other attribute, like for example, if you want to add your ID, we will say name, for example, and the name. So as you know, the name attribute here is used because if you don't put the name, when you click on the submit button, the system is not going to transmit or send the data written in that input. So you need to put the name attribute and assign a value to it. So this is the input type text, and this is how it will appear on the screen. Let me just add a label here. Okay, I will say label like this, name, and let me close the label tag. Let me bring a break line like this. Yes, so this is the input text. So if you want to create a text input, and by default, your input, if you don't specify the type, it's going to be a text field. The second type of input that we can talk about is going to be the password, the input type password. So the input type password is going to be used to define, passwords. Let's say, for example, here we'll say password, label, break line, and down here we'll say input. So the type, since this is going to be used for capturing your password, we'll say password here, and then we can add ID. That would be password, the name equal to password as well. And let's add a break line here. We say break line. So this is going to be a password field. So when you write, you can see bulleted points are showing in the field because this is considered to be a password, and this is for security control, because the password is a sensitive information, so when you write it, it's not supposed to be displayed. So that's how you create a password input type. Okay, so the characters, so the difference is that the characters in your password field are marked. Okay, they are going to be shown as bullets, like you can see showing on the screen here. Let's talk about another type of input. This is going to be the input type submit. Okay, let me just copy this. Let me first add the break line, I will copy this line of code down here. So the submit here is going to be used if you want to define a button that will be used to submit your form data to a form handler. So the form handler is typically going to be a server with a script for processing your input data. Okay, and the form handler is specified in the form's action attribute. Okay, like for example, in the form here, you're gonna say action is equal to, and specify the file or the page or the file that will receive, the input data for processing. Like for example, we will say home at HTML, for example. Okay, this is just an example, but basically the submit type is going to allow us to create an input. So if you say submit here, and then we are going to use a different attribute here that would be value. So the value here is going to determine the text that will show on the button. So we'll say value, let's say sign up, for example, like this. Okay, so this is going to show the button, as you can see here. We can add a break line here. Okay, so this is the input type submit. So if you forget the submit button's value attribute, the button will get a default text. Okay, if you forget to put your value here, now you can see it will get a default text. So my browser is in French, so it is going to get this particular default text. All right, but if you put the value here, you are going to determine your own value that you want to show on the submit button. You can put sign up or submit, the text, whatever text you want to write. Another input type that we can talk about is going to be the reset input type. So let's copy this, paste it here. So as for this one, let me remove the break line here. So the type, as I said, is going to be the reset type. So if you say reset like this, and then the value will say reset. So the reset button, okay, the reset type is actually going to allow you to create a reset button that will reset all your form values to their default values. Okay. So as you can see, if you type some information in your fields here, and then when you click on reset like this, it's going to, reset all the form values to their default values. So the default values for these fields are, empty values. So that's what you can do with the reset button or the reset input type. Okay. Another type of information that we can talk about would be the radio button. Okay, the radio type. If it is going to be used, if you want to create radio buttons. So let's say this. Copy it like this. Come down here. So in our input type, here we will say radio. And then in ID, we will say city. I always say Paris, for example, for the name of the city. In the name here, say cities, and then we can assign a value. For the value, we will say Paris. And as for the label, say Paris like this. And we need the for attribute. So this is going to link our label to the radio button. And so the for attribute value here needs to be equal to the ID. So this is going to be Paris like this. Okay, so let me remove this break line like this. Okay, as for this one as well, I will say for name, and this label will be for password. So now here, I'm going to add another radio button. And the type will still be radio. And I will say Michigan. Now the name would be cities. And here, say Michigan. For Michigan. And now we'll change here. So this is how you create your radio buttons. So the radio buttons will actually let a user select only one of a limited number of choices. So that's the use of the radio button. Now let's talk about the next input type, that is going to be checkbox. If you want to create a checkbox, how would you do that? Okay, for creating checkbox, you are going to use the input as well, but the input type would be the type checkbox. So we say checkbox like this. Okay. So if you say checkbox, right, there's a typo. Let me come back here. So checkbox, a break line. So in the checkbox, you can say that you want to put ID, countries as for the name, and the value will be France. And here we say country 1. For attribute would be the same. That will be France. Say France like this. And you can add for fun for this video, maybe another checkbox. So the type will still be checkbox here. ID USA. No, country 2. USA. USA and USA here. So add another break line. So now you can see we have our checkboxes, 2 checkboxes that we have added. Okay, so checkboxes are used, for example, to let a user select 1 or 0 or more options of a limited number of choices. So this is how you create a checkbox. The type of the input needs to be checkbox here. The radio button, the type needs to be radio. Another input type that we need to talk about is going to be the button type. Okay, if you want to create, a normal button using the input element, so you will need an input, like this. You come here and say type. Instead of submit, you can simply say button. So the type button here is going to create a normal button. And then you can say the value, click here, for example. And this is going to say click here. So this is a normal button. Yes. All right. So let's talk about another input type. So that would be the type color. Okay, so the input type color is going to be used for input fields that should contain a color. So let's, for example, if we say input type equal color, and the ID equal my color, and we put that inside the double quotes. Maybe we'll just say that the name is also going to be the same, my color, and close that. So there you can see we are having our input with a color here. So when you click, you can select the color in the input. Okay. So you can select the color from the input like this. All right. Let's talk about another input. That would be the input type date. So the input type date is used for dates. If you want to create a field that should contain a date. Okay. Let's say, for example, if we say date here as the type, and say my date, or we can say the name here, my date. There you can see how that particular field is showing. Let me just break another line here like this. Break another line here. Yes, so here we have our field. So because we said type date here, now when you click on the field, it's going to show a calendar. When you select, there you can see the date has been selected. So you can also use the minimum and maximum attributes to add some restrictions to the dates that you can show in the field. Okay. So for example, if we say that here we want a minimum date to be 01 01 2000. So if we come, let's change the format. So 01 01. So here it seems not to. Okay, so you have to write the year, the month, and then the day. So now if I come to my calendar here, you will see that I can't go beyond 2018. Now, if I scroll up here, I can't go beyond that because we specified the minimum date would be 2018. And if I say maximum, let me, yeah. So in order to be able to do that, I can say that the maximum would be 2019, like this. Okay, let me say max here. And then you will see that in our calendar, we won't go beyond 2019 here. Because we said max 2019, January 1st. But we can still go 2 years before that. Okay, so this is how you can use the max and the minimum attributes to add some restrictions to your date input field. Let's now talk about another input field, which is the date time local. Let me copy this. Come here. Maybe remove this. And in type, I will say date time local. And in ID, I can say local date, local date. So here, the datetime local type, input type, is going to help you to specify a date and a time input field with no time zone. All right. So here you can specify the date and the time that you want in your particular field. Yes, so that's it. So now there's another input type that we can talk about, which is going to be the email field or the email type. So let's take this, copy, paste it down here. So we will say email, and the type of this particular input is going to be email as well. The name will be email, the ID will be email, and the name will be email. So there you can see we have our email field. So the email field here is used for inputs field that should contain an email address. Okay. And the email address in this particular field can automatically be validated when submitted. And also, by default, you can see that there's a control. Like if you write some letters and if the value that you write in the field, in the email field, does not respect the email format, you have a tooltip or an error showing you, telling you what you should do in order for you to respect the email format. So still here, we have not respected the email format. When I put my cursor on the field, I will get this tooltip telling me to add the @ sign. If I add the @ sign, I will still get another error that will tell me that my email is not complete yet. I can add another text here. So here I don't get any message telling me because this is a valid email format. But the moment I put that here and stop there you can see another error that will tell me that I need to complete my email address. Okay, if I say .com, example, I will not get any error. So by default, HTML is going to put some control on this particular email field. All right, so that's it for the email field. Let's now talk about another input type, which is going to be the image type. So the image type will come down here. We will say input type equal image. So the image type here is going to define an image as a submit button. Okay, so you need to determine the source of your image. We say source equal, and then we will put the source or the link, the URL to the image, but I'll come back to that after that. I can also define or specify the alternative text. I will say submit here. What else I can add? I will say width, for example, would be 80. The height may be equal to 60, like this, and then close the bracket. As for the URL of the image, I will copy this particular image, copy its URL and paste it here. There you can see I have my image. I can break line like this. So as I said, this particular image is going to be used as a submit button. So let me just come and cut it and paste it maybe here. So this is how you can use the image as, a type of input. Yes, that's it. What else can we talk about? What other type of input can we talk about? All right, so let's talk about the file type. Okay, that will be here. We will say that we want an input type will be equal to file, and the ID will be equal to my file, name equal to my file. Let me close the bracket like this. And then break line, break line. So there you can see here is this particular input type is going to be used to define a file select field and a browse button for file uploads. If you want to upload some files, you click here. It's going to show you, this particular, it's going to open this window, and then you can select your file and upload that. So that's basically the use of this input type file if you want to upload some file. Okay. So you can also add a label here. For example, you can say select a file and all of that, but by default, it's going to write some text here. All right, so that's it if you want to create a file input. Next would be the type hidden. Okay, so you are going to create an input, say input type hidden, like this. So this is going to define a hidden input field, so a field that is not going to be visible to the user. So the hidden field will be, maybe let developers include some data that cannot be seen or modified by users of the form. Okay, and this particular hidden field, for example, are going to be stored. Are going to store what database record that needs to be updated when the form is submitted and all of that. So you may come across a scenario where you would need to use this particular input type hidden. So here we will say, maybe the ID will be parent name. Okay, and the name would be equal to parent name, like this. So as you can see, nothing is going to show here on the screen because this is a hidden input type, and hidden input types, are going to be hidden and not visible to the end users. That's why you can't see it on the screen here, but it can be useful for developers, for example, for storing some data in a database and all of that. Okay, now let's talk about another input type, which is going to be the type month. That is going to allow the user to select a month and a year. Let's put it here. Let's come down here. Down here, paste it. Let me break line like this. So here the type is going to be month. The ID, say my month. And maybe the name, we will still say my month, for example. Yeah, so like I was saying here, for this particular field, it will allow you to select the month and the year. You can say 2023 and all of that. So when you click on the year, you select the month, and then that's how it's going to show on your screen. Yes. So that's for this input type. The next input type that we can talk about is going to be the input type number. So the input type number is going to define a numeric input field. You can also set restrictions on what numbers are going to be accepted and what will not be accepted at all. So let's add this. Let me copy, paste here. So instead of month here, we will write type equal to number. And then in the ID, we will say my number. My number. Okay. So when you say like this, there you can see you have this particular field. When you click on this arrow button, it is going to increase the number showing in the field. When you decrease that, okay, you can even show minus numbers. So let's say, for example, you want to determine the minimum value, the minimum number to show. You want it to be 1, for example. and the maximum number to display, you want it to be 10. What will happen? So when you come here, when you click, when it reaches 10, you can't go above 10. When you decrease, when it reaches 1, you can go below 1 because you have these attributes that you have specified here. Okay, so this is going to display a numeric field, input field, where you can enter a value from 1 to 10. And all of that. And one other thing that you need to note is that these input fields also have restrictions. Okay, some things that you can, some other attributes that you can add in order to restrict, the function of this input. But this is not the purpose of this video. Let's continue having a look at other inputs. The next input that we will talk about here would be the input type range. Input type range here. Okay, let me talk about it. Range. I'm going to write it up here. So let me copy this, paste it up here. So the input type range is going to help you create or define a control for entering a number whose exact value is not important. Okay, so the default range is going to be from 0 to 100. However, you can still set some restrictions on what numbers are accepted by using the minimum, the maximum attributes or the step attributes. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's take this. So instead of file here, we will say range. Okay. Range, the ID, we say volume, for example, and the name will be volume. So there you see what will show on the screen here. We have this bar will show here, so you can set the range. So as I said, by default, it's from 0 to 100, but you can set some minimum value. For example, if you say minimum equal to 10, and then maximum equal to 50. Okay, so this is going to apply that. All right, so let's jump to the next input. So the next input here, let me copy that again. We are going to talk about the input type search. So instead of writing range here, we'll say search. So search is used for search fields. So a search field is going to behave like a regular text field. Okay, so I'm going to say search. The ID will be search. The name will be search as well. And then let me remove that here. So this is going to be a search field. So it's going to display just like a regular text field, but this particular field is going to be used if, for example, on your website, you want the user to search through your website. You can use this input type and say that the type will be search, so that the browser will consider it as a search field. Okay, so let's move on to another input type. Will be the input type tel, okay, for telephone. If you want to display your telephone number on your website, you have to use this. So we'll come here, type, we'll say tel. So the ID, say telephone. Here we'll say telephone as well. So when you come down here, so for us not to confuse, let me cut this and bring it up here. So there you have it. So in this particular input tag, we can add a pattern, like say pattern is equal to, in double quotations, you can add a regular expression, of that is going to determine what values, the phone will be made up of. Okay, we can say something like that. 0 to 9. In the curly braces, 2 hyphen 0 to 9, curly braces, 3. So this is going to make sure that you need to respect, the values that you need to write in your telephone field. So if you do not respect it, there you have a message telling you to respect the required format. So like here, for example, we need to have 3 numbers. And then 2, 3. So if you respect like this, now you will not have any error message showing on the screen. So that's how you can actually add an input field that is going to be used to actually input your telephone numbers. All right. What else can we talk about? Let's talk about the input type time. So this is going to allow the user to select a time, for example. We add this, allowing the user to select the month and the year. Here we have the day, the month of the year, and the hour, the minutes. Here we have the day, the month, and the year. But what if you just want the user to select, in an input, a time? What can you do? So what we are going to do is that we will copy maybe this. Let me come down here and copy this. We will come up here. So instead of month here, we will say time. We'll say time. And the name will say time. Yeah, so if you do it like this, then you can see you have this particular field showing. And when you click on it, you can select the time. The user will be able to select the time and all of that. All right. And then the next one would be the input type URL. So the input type URL is used for input fields that should contain a URL address. So let's take an example. So here, instead of time, we'll say URL. The ID will say web page. Okay, just for an example purpose. And web page here as well. So this will need to contain a URL. So if you do not write a correct URL format, this is going to get you an error message telling you to write your URL. Say that google.com when you put your cursor here. So this will still tell you to write the URL correctly. Okay. So if you put HTTPS before here, there it's gonna tell you that you have written your URL correctly. All right, and so that's it for the input type URL. So if you want an input where you want the user to type a URL in that particular field, you will need this type URL. So this input type is made for this kind of reason. And let's talk about the last input type that we can, that we can have. That would be the week type, the week input type. So let me copy this, paste it here. So instead of time, we'll say week. And then let me add the ID, the name. And here, there you can see how this is shown. So you can select the week of, that you want. So here you have the numbering of your weeks depending on, where you find yourself. So if you select here, it's going to select the whole line and tell you the number of the week and the year, like this. So the input type week allows the user to select a week and a year. And just like I have shown you here, you can select your week depending on the year. If you say, for example, that you want to go back to 2022, for example, and you want the month of May, and select here, so it's gonna do this. So guys, let's stop here. So these are the various types of input that you can have in HTML form. And if you have any question, I know that in this video we've seen a lot of things and you may have questions. So if you have questions, feel free to write them in the comment section, and I'm going to be willing and more than willing to answer your question. And if you like, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this video, and let's meet in the next video.